Good morning, Peter. Very glad to welcome you in our presentation about vaccine. So, Professor Peter Pitts is president and founder of the Center for Medicine in Public Interest. Is also a professor in the Faculty of Medicine in Paris. And he was a former FDA Associate Commissioner. So thank you to join us today. And I would like to ask you a few questions. According to your experience, what do you think of the coming vaccine and the good news that we had till now, and the review in the FDA and the timeline? What should we expect?
Thank you, Irene. I'm very excited on the one hand and optimistic. On the other hand, I'm worried and anxious. I'm very excited that in such swift sequence, we have two vaccines that look as though they will get an emergency use authorization from the FDA even before Christmas. The Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. There are going to be two advisory committee hearings in the US held by the FDA. First, next week, on December 6th, they'll discuss the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, and then on the 16th, another meeting to discuss the Moderna vaccine. The fact that these two vaccines are ready to be discussed at all is really quite astounding. And the fact that they are each in the vicinity of 95% effective is also miraculous. You never see those types of effectiveness numbers with vaccines. And that's largely due to science and technology and mRNA technologies specifically. I think it shows that when all parts of the healthcare ecosystem pull in the same direction, we can accomplish amazing things very rapidly. And that doesn't mean that we're rushing. It means that we're expediting. And that's an important distinction. It's a distinction with a difference. Because when you rush, you cut corners and you make mistakes, and that's not acceptable. When you expedite, you take time, talent, and treasure, and you put it against one immediate task. In this case, diagnostics and therapeutics, and most importantly, vaccines to combat COVID-19. So on the one hand, I'm extremely excited that we've come this far, this fast. I'm very optimistic that the data that's going to be discussed with the FDA will hold up. And I predict that we will have an emergency use authorization for one, possibly two of these vaccines prior to Christmas, certainly within 2021. I'm concerned that with the FDA's go-ahead, people are still going to be very cautious about getting vaccinated quickly. And that's not just for COVID-19, but also for the annual flu. It's very important, certainly in the US, that we convince people that science has driven this process, that politics has not been involved. Unfortunately, in the US, obviously we've just had a presidential election. And a lot of people who voted for President Trump are upset. They don't really want to help move the public health forward. I think they'll get over that. We all get disappointed, and then we're adults. We get through it. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people, I think, on both the Democratic and the Republican sides who doubt the scientific robustness that went behind the development of both of these vaccines. And it's important to educate them that no corners were cut, that science drove the entire process, and that as a result, it's extremely important that we get vaccinated, certainly to protect ourselves and our families, but on a broader basis, our communities, our states, the US and the world. Once we hit 60% vaccination rates in the US, we're well on our way to a herd immunity type of situation, which is why it's so important that people don't wait. You can't be a slow follower. We all have to be very excited to be the first in our families to get inoculated. I certainly want to be the first person that I know of everybody, even before you, Irene.
I will be the first.
Well, I'm going to elbow you out of my way so I can be first.
No, in Israel, I will be first.
well, in Israel, everybody's elbowing everybody all the time anyway, right? So I think what's very important to recognize that in the US, there are really three distinct constituencies that need to be educated as to the value of vaccines. The first are communities of color, the Latin community, the Hispanic community, the African American community, communities of color, because they historically have not been treated very well by the US government when it comes to healthcare issues. And it's historic, but it's true. And these communities need to be communicated with in a very respectful manner in a way they can understand. Because these are also the same communities that have higher infection rates for a variety of reasons. So to have these communities of color that have the highest infection rates, we can't allow them to have the lowest inoculation rates. It would be a public health disaster. The second group of people, which are the overwhelming majority of people, are those who just aren't quite sure what vaccinations are for, if they're really that important. Maybe they should wait. New technology is kind of frightening. It happens fast. Can it be trusted? And that's where we really need to explain to people the process and the fact that the FDA, demands robust science, that politics has not entered into the conversation. The third group are people that don't believe in vaccines at all, the anti-vax community. And to my mind, these people are nothing short of healthcare terrorists. And on the one hand, I think we can just ignore them, but they exist. They are influencers. I think we need to speak to them as well to convince them that vaccines are incredibly important, and that de minimis, they should simply stop telling lies about what vaccines do. It's amazing in 2020, almost 2021, that we're still talking about vaccines causing autism, despite hundreds of thousands of pages of solid research that debunks that myth. So, strong public health education in the US, and I'm sure in Europe and in Israel and all around the world is incredibly important. And that, I guess, then leads to the question of, can a vaccine or a number of vaccines be distributed equitably around the world? I believe that they can. The people that are manufacturing these vaccines have said they're going to institute a differential pricing strategy. So the price in the US for two inoculations of either the Pfizer, BioNTech, or the Moderna vaccine will cost more or less the same as the annual flu shot. So people understand that. But these companies have also said that they are going to institute differential pricing, so that in countries with fewer resources, it will cost less. So I think that we're well on our way to success. And then obviously the big question becomes logistics. How do you distribute vaccines that need to be refrigerated at very low temperatures all around the world? Not so there's not just access, but there are numerous points of access to get people vaccinated.
We know that, thank you. We know that in Israel we have already cut a deal with Pfizer and with Moderna, that we have already bought some of the vaccines that will arrive, that are expected to arrive in December. And why do we need, according to you, do we need several vaccines? Now that we have these two vaccines, why do we need other vaccines?
I think going more vaccines is better than fewer. Obviously, if you only have one vaccine, you're at the discretion of the company. There can be manufacturing problems. There can be transportation problems. Having more vaccines will allow many, many millions more people all around the world to get vaccinated. Right now, the data that's supporting certainly the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccine, and also the AstraZeneca, Oxford vaccine, and I think all the other vaccines that will be in the first iteration of approved treatments, don't really have data to support subpopulations. So we don't know which vaccine might be better for an older population, or for women, or for pregnant women, or for children, or for people with pre-existing respiratory conditions. So right now, the value of having more than one vaccine is volumetrics. The more companies that are manufacturing vaccines, the more vaccines will be available to the global population. That's very important. The second thing to consider, this is not the beginning and the end of COVID-19 vaccine development. This is just the very beginning. As we go forward, and there are many, many more programs underway to develop vaccines, we might conceivably move from 2 injections to 1 injection. That's very important, because right now, you have to get vaccinated twice, 3 weeks apart, and that doesn't speak very well for patient compliance, for example. And it causes logistics problems. It's not as user-friendly as it could be. Also, as we move forward, hopefully we'll have vaccines that are specifically designed for specific subpopulations. So more vaccines now and going forward are important for a whole host of very urgent public health issues.
What do you think about the people who are saying we don't have enough long-term view or about adverse events of vaccine? So I will wait 6 months, 1 year. What do you think about that?
I think people who are saying, well, these are new vaccines, I've got some science questions, I've got some politics questions, I'm just going to wait and see. You know, that's not allowable, because right now we need to get people vaccinated as quickly as possible and as many people as possible, so we can begin to reopen our economies, reopen our schools, save lives, and move forward. You know, I trust the FDA's view of the data. They're having an advisory committee, which they chose to do. They didn't have to, but I think they did that to instill confidence in the public. Right now is not the time to wait. Right now, waiting makes you part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
Thank you. And what is your last recommendation for Israeli people and all over the world, all the people who are looking at us?
I think the most important thing to remember is that no medical product, whether it's a diagnostic test or a therapeutic or a vaccine, is ever 100% safe and effective. You know, safety and effectiveness is an equation, and that equation is based on the severity of the public health need. What's wonderful about the COVID-19 vaccines, which focus on an urgent global pandemic, is that the side effects are really more or less the same as a flu shot. Slight headaches, you know, muscle aches, possibly some sight soreness, very minor side effects. So I think the fact that we have a number of products coming online right now that have almost no side effects, but that are extremely effective for a very serious condition really speaks to the miraculous nature of the science that we've developed to combat COVID-19.
I like very much your last sentence in one of your interviews, many interviews, saying that if we don't vaccinate, what it will be.
You know, this is not an academic exercise. You know, we've spent billions of dollars on the basic science, on the development science, on the manufacturing, and now on the distribution and inoculation aspects of the vaccines. Having a vaccine that nobody uses is not a public health victory, it's a public health disaster.
Thank you so much. According to you, when do we go back to normal life if we are vaccinated all over the world?
I think once that's beginning to roll out around the world, we'll be back to normal, possibly as early as Passover. You know, I think wow. In the U.S., I think certainly in the U.S., we'll have the EUAs this year. I think 2 or more vaccines will be fully approved by the FDA in early 2021, which really means we then have to ramp up the logistics and make sure people have access to the vaccine and the access points are prepared to begin inoculating people in mass numbers. And again, that goes back to the need for public education. But I'm optimistic. I think that by Passover, we will be well on our way to achieving 60% inoculation rates or herd immunity. But my goal is 100%. And I think that by the end of 2021, we should be close to that number or getting nearer to it, certainly past 60%. I don't know what normal is going to mean once we all get vaccinated. It will certainly mean children will be back in school regularly. It means that we'll be back at work, both virtually and actually on a regular basis. We'll be traveling, we'll be meeting with our friends and family. So Passover is, I think, a good holiday to shoot for relative to allowing that to happen.
So good news, and it's really good to hear some optimistic views and enthusiastic view. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.